Okay, we're in Matthew. We left off at chapter 25. Let's see how far we get today. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. At midnight a cry was heard, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him." Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "No, lest there should not be enough for us and you, and go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves." While they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." And he answered and said, "Assuredly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming." You obviously understand the message there, okay? How many were here when Nehemiah Maxwell was here? Okay, remember one of the songs he used to sing? Midnight Call?
Right.
Midnight Call. Oh, he was famous for that song. I still got it on one of his CDs. And the whole point is, it's a parable about the second coming of Christ. And the point is, you're either ready or you're not. So if you're one of those who doesn't think it's necessary to plan ahead, you're going to be left behind. And he says, basically, what it's saying is when he comes, there's going to be those that, "Oh, wait, we're not quite ready yet." And he simply says, "I'm sorry, I really don't know you." So it's a sad commentary where a lot of church people are going to be found when that day comes, because they really weren't ready for the long haul. Those who, I remember a young lady telling me one time, she said, "Well, I got saved just so I won't go to hell." Well, that's the wrong reason to get it. I mean, chances are you're going to go anyway, because your motives are completely incorrect. So essentially what she's saying is, if he comes right now, I want to make sure I'm ready, but I'm not going to change my lifestyle. I just want to get saved so I don't go to hell. That's a wrong motive. And so he's addressing that. And that's pretty much a commentary on today's church, really. There are people just aren't really ready. They're just there because they want to make sure that if he comes, they're going to go, and they're not going to go. And the longer this has been lately on some Facebook post, I think I mentioned it last week. Well, Christians have been saying this for years, and it still hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. So those are those who really aren't ready for the long haul. Their lamps aren't full. They just kind of waited so long they're going to give up and go back to their old lifestyle, which means they really weren't committed anyway. That's the sad story. Verse 14, another parable. Okay, the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability, and immediately he went on his journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5. Likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who received 1 went and dug it in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them, and so he who had received 5 talents came and brought him another 5, saying, "Lord, you delivered me 5 talents, here I've gained 5 more talents besides that." The Lord said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord." He also who had received the 2 talents came and said, "Lord, you delivered to me 2. Look, I've gained 2 more talents beside." The Lord said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord." Now, notice here, the amount of talents has nothing to do with it. Okay? Or you would say, refer to the gifts God's given you, your life. That doesn't make a bit of difference. It's their faithfulness. Whether you've, say, you served Christ for 50 years or it's been 2 weeks, whether you've committed to do all these things, it doesn't care. The bottom line is, he says, you're faithful. I'm going to reward you, give you many things beyond that. So that's one of the important parts of this message. It's not how much I've got, how much I give, it's how faithful I've been in the end. So it has nothing to do with, it's going to put us on these scales here and see which is where I fall outweigh. It's got nothing to do with that at all. You've been faithful, therefore I reward you. But it goes on.
Question.
Yep.
I always thought basically it's the gift that God gave you, like fruits of the Spirit, how many He gave you.
right? That this parable was all about, and how you use.
Yeah, I think I think that's probably true too. So what are you doing? What are you doing with what God gave you?
Yeah.
And I think people have abilities and talents that they just don't want to use, and they're just lying dormant. So what's going to happen on the day of reckoning? God says, "I gave you this, or I called you to." Example. It's a family in the church that graduated from Zion, the same school that Pastor and I graduated from, and he went home after college. And I remember years later when I found out he'd graduated from Bible college, I asked him why he never went into ministry. He said, well, he said, I went home and nobody ever called me. I think, what a waste. In other words, he never pursued the gifts he had. And he ended up working and living in a mill, those old mill complexes, you know, the long string of brick houses, very poor. Worked in some factory, made a minimal living. They were never dressed properly, just very poor. But that was he just went home and sat and said, well, nobody ever called me. The point is here he had this gift, had the ability, but he never used it. And so, yeah, you're right. So God's going to ask us the same thing. What did you do with what I gave you? You know, I gave you this ability, and you did nothing with it. And people somehow think that God's going to come down and, you know, and then make you do something. I remember growing up, when I felt a call to ministry, I told God he was off his rocker, basically. Very backward, very shy, always sat at the back of the classroom, never spoke up, never, ever, ever. But when I made that commitment, going to Bible college, it changed. I had to make a decision because I had a choice of what kind of a career I wanted. I could choose the Navy. They offered me a generous package. I've always wanted to be a rancher. I looked into being a real estate broker, all these things through high school, and then I started feeling the calling in the Navy. And when I made that decision to go to Bible college, it's like everything changed. I had to make a decision. And once the decision was made, suddenly I felt comfortable standing up in front of people, where before I couldn't do that at all. And so like that's a miracle in itself. So it is, God gives us abilities and gifts. What are we going to do with it? You're going to sit there and just let it go to waste, or are you going to do something with it? This is how I raise my kids, like Sherry and Scott now. They finally found a church, and the first thing she says, now we're looking for an area we can get involved and do something, because you know, she's got gifts, he's got gifts, they got abilities, and she said, we don't want to sit here and do nothing. We want to do something. So they're meeting with the pastor now and finding an area where they can plug themselves in and get involved in ministry. My son did the same thing when going to the Baptist church. Him and his wife both had to find a place of ministry. They ended up teaching Sunday school together, running the youth groups. It's a matter of God's given you something, not to do something with it. So, okay, pick it up. 24. Then he who received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed, and I was afraid. Went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, here I have what is yours. So the Lord answered and said, you wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, gather where I have not scattered seed. Therefore you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and in my coming at least I would receive back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him, give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast that unprofitable servant into the outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So it's a hard commentary. The fact is, as Christians, we're not to be stagnant. We got to go beyond just being warmers in the pew. And that's sad to say is where a lot of people are today. They just want to come to church, and no, we've got the same problem here, but we've talked about it before. It's very difficult to get people involved in anything because they just want to come and be fed and just get spiritually overweight. If we were to put, they don't want to do any spiritual exercise. We just want to come and we just want to. Remember, I mentioned probably over a year ago the thought of doing a early morning men's prayer. There's no interest on a Saturday morning. No interest at all. And the pastor approached me a couple of years ago and said, why don't the men want to get it? And we have a problem getting people involved. And that's one of the things I think this parable deals with. God gave you gifts and talents. You either use them or you go stagnant, and then Let's see what happens on the day of judgment, you know. Verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, he will sit on the throne with his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him. He will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me." And the righteous will answer and say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty, or give you to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" See, the point of this here is that serving God is so natural, you don't think about it as serving God. It's the outcrop of your faith. Doing things for others is so normal that we don't think about, oh, I'm actually serving God. We go to the prison, we help somebody with food, we help somebody move, we do it. The fact that we're doing things for other people is actually a process of serving God. And this is where they don't, I didn't realize we were serving you doing that. And God says, no, this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, and the king answered and said to them, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me." And then he will also say to those on his left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not take me in. Naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me." They will answer and say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick in prison and did not minister to you?" And he will answer them, saying, "Assuredly I say to you, and insomuch as you did not do it to the least of these, you didn't do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life." And again, it's like, okay, we're part of the same fellowship. There are always those who are willing to help, and there are those who don't have the time to help. And that's the way it is in the world. And basically, it is a parable about that, you know? Again, God's given you various gifts. What are you going to do about it? You see somebody in need, I don't have time, you know, I don't have the money, I don't this and that. I remember when pastoring, you'd always get these people coming to the church wanting for money. And the problem is you never know if they're truthful or not. And we learned after a few years there were families that did this on a regular basis. They would come to the area and visit all the churches, and one of the local pastors was telling me about it. I said, "Oh, I remember that family." And he first says, "You didn't give them any money, did you?" I helped them out. He said, "Well, this is what they do." So from that point on somebody would stop by, somebody needed food, I would say, "Okay, here, let me take you out to lunch." 9 times out of 10, they refused to do it. They wanted money. They would not want me to take them out. "Let me take you down. I know the owner of the gas station, put some gas in." "Oh, no, just give us the money, we'll take care of it ourselves." So you learn that there are people who do that, and so, but you offer to help, but it's amazing how many people, so who was telling me the other day, but somebody who, you know, on the street corners, telling them how much money they made. This was just a few weeks ago. I forget who it was. And that's the point. They don't want to work, they just want handouts. And this is why I don't give handouts to people on the corner. Number one, you don't know where it's going. And they did the news reports on these people driving off in their brand new Lincoln Continentals and going to these big fancy houses. And it's just a way of making money without having to work for it. So we do have to be cautious. Okay, any questions on chapter 25? Okay, 26. Now it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings that he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." And the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. And they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask, very costly fragrant oil. She poured it on his head, and as he sat at the table. And when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "To what purpose is this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor." But when Jesus was aware of it, he said, "Why do you trouble the woman? She has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you don't have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, that what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. But again, they saw the wrong meaning of what the woman knew. She was actually taking something very, very costly and giving it to him. Somehow she knew who he was and was actually anointing him with this precious oil.
Well, isn't it also interesting that Jesus spent the house with a leper?
Yeah.
Very
Again,
interesting.
going places where nobody else would go.
Yeah.
And that's the key to this is why he was so often criticized, like whether it's at Zacchaeus' house or someone else. Look at what he's doing. He's hanging around with these evil people, these sick people. 14, then one of the disciples, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you? And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now, on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, where do we want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? He says, go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. Now, when evening was come, he sat down with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, surely I say to you, one of you will betray me. They were exceedingly sorrowful. Each one of them began to say to him, Lord, is it I? And he answered, said, he who has dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man goes as is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. So it's serious to betray Christ. Then Judas, who was betraying him, answers him, Rabbi, is it I? Now the guy's got to be an idiot at this point. He knows it's him. So he's trying to figure, does he really know what's going on here? And he said to him, you have said it. Then Judas, who was betraying him, I'll tell you, and then as they were sitting, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, gave it to the disciples, said, take, eat, this is my body. He took the cup, gave thanks, gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day that I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. And when they sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said, all of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I've been raised, I will go before you in Galilee. And Peter answered and said, even if all were made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. Jesus said, assuredly, I say to you, that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said, even I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And so did all the disciples said the same thing. And Jesus came with them to the place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. He took with him Peter, the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. And he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here, watch with me. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them asleep, and said to Peter, what? Could you not watch with me even 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. He went away again a second time and prayed, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass from me unless I drink it, your will be done. He came and he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, he who betrays me is at hand. While he was yet speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whoever I kiss, he's the one. Seize him. Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. And Jesus said, friend, why have you come? Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said, put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I'll pray to my Father, and he will provide for me more than 12 legions of angels? How then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus? In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, have you come out against us, against a robber, with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple. You didn't seize me. But all this is done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. Those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed at a distance to the high priest's courtyard. He went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus kept silent. The high priest answered again and said, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you've heard his blasphemy. What do you think? They answered and said, he is deserving of death. And they spat on his face, beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you? Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came and saying, you were also with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you're saying. When he'd gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to him, you were there. This fellow also was Jesus of Nazareth. But again he denied with an oath, I do not know that man. And after a while, those who stood by came to him and said to Peter, surely you are also one of them, because your speech betrays you. And he began to curse and swear, saying, I do not know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And he remembered the word of Jesus, who said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. It's an extremely sad story, huh? Mm-hmm. Number one, I don't think they really understood what was going on. Jesus goes off to pray by himself 3 separate times, and every time they simply fall asleep. He says, you can't wait with me at all? And then he tells them exactly when it happens, you're all going to leave me. Peter, never going to happen. The other disciples said the same thing. No, it's not going to happen. Yet as soon as they arrive, they all run. And then Peter here 3 separate times actually denies. Then he curses and swears. Then suddenly the rooster crows. I can't even imagine what was going through his mind at that time, suddenly realizing what he had actually done.
Well, what that get me is verse 48, whom I kissed.
Yeah.
My thing is, so all the priests and the high priest and all that didn't recognize Jesus. Why did they need the symbol to show that he's Jesus?
Because I don't think it was the priests and them that came. It was a crowd of people. I don't necessarily.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't the priest. It was the.
And I don't think they knew who.
It was the temple soldiers. And it could be that they could have seen him, but I think to avoid making any mistakes, because remember Peter lashed out and cut off the ear of one of the soldiers of the high priest. So it was actually the what do you call them? The soldiers of the temple. They weren't actually Roman soldiers. They were the Jewish soldiers that came to arrest him. And I think Judas' mind, just to make sure that we don't get the wrong guy. And again, the audacity, you know. Hi, how you doing? You know, oh, so glad to see you. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Okay, arrest him.
And also, it's interesting we see the humanity of Jesus, in this, because he's telling God, please take this away from me. Please take it away from me, but your will is, it needs to be done. It's just like, man, that. He
understood exactly what was going to happen, and it wasn't something he looked forward to. Yet he knew it had to happen. He said, Lord, Father, listen, if this can be done any other way, please let me know. Come back again, Father. If any other way, finally, no, but whatever your will is, I will do it. So Again, fulfilling prophecy, he willingly went to the cross, willingly gave his life, knowing exactly what was going to happen, knowing the penalty, knowing the pain, knowing everything else. He said, I will do this. I will do this for you, for the people. Yeah, amazing story. 27. And when morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. When they had bound him, they led him away, delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, and said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what's that to us? You see it. So finally he wants to repent. And what kind of idiot does that? He makes sure Jesus is arrested, and suddenly I think he realizes that this isn't exactly what I expected was going to happen. He threw down the 30 pieces of silver at the temple and departed, went out and hanged himself. The chief priest took the silver piece and said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury because this is the price of blood. They took counsel and bought with them a potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore the field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet said, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel pierced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Now Jesus stood before the governor. And the governor asked, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, it is as you say. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. And Pilate said, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? He answered not a word. So the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus who is called Christ? For he knew that because of envy they had delivered him. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife came to him, saying, have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. And the governor answered and said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate said, what then shall I do with this Christ, Jesus who's called the Christ? And they yelled out, let him be crucified. The governor says, why? What evil has he done? But they cried out all the more, saying, let him be crucified. And when Pilate saw that he could not prevail, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, and said, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. And all the people answered and said, his blood be on us and on our children. And they released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. There's a very prophetic statement there. Let his blood be upon us. We accept the penalty for crucifying the Christ. And from that point on, the Jews really did suffer. And they've suffered all through history. And it's like they put a curse upon themselves. 27. The soldiers and the governor took Jesus to the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand, they bowed down and kneeled before him, mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spat on him, took the reed and struck him on the head. When they had mocked him, they took the robe off of him, put his own clothes on him, and led away to be crucified. Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink it. And they crucified him, divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which is spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them. For my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him there. And they put up over his head the accusation written against him. This is Jesus, King of the Jews. The two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right, one on the left. Those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads, saying, You who destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come off the cross. Likewise, the chief priest also mocked with the scribes and elders, saying, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, and he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness over the land. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of those who stood by, they heard that and said, the man is calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come and save him. And Jesus, when he cried out against with a loud voice, yielded up his spirit, and behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, the rocks were split, the graves were opened. Many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly. Truly, this was the Son of God. And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, were there looking from afar. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Now when evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also been a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. And when Joseph had taken the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock, he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. And Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the tomb. On the next day, which followed, the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, Sir, will you remember while he was yet alive how the deceiver said, After 3 days I will arise? Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest the disciples come by night and steal his body away and say to the people, He has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said, You have a guard, go your way, make it as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. So things are pretty much at an end right now.
I've got one question and a comment. My question is this. Was scourging part of the crucifixion process?
Yeah. So you notice Matthew doesn't deal with that. Mm-hmm. The other disciples will deal with that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he kind of, like he doesn't talk about the thief on the cross. Mm-hmm. He doesn't talk about the scourging and the whipping. The other disciples go in detail. So from Matthew's viewpoint, that wasn't important that time because he's talking to the Jews. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And later on, the other disciples talking to other groups will go into a little more detail what he went through. But this everything is going through now. Everything, prophecy is being fulfilled.
Yeah. Because the reason I asked was that part of the Roman punishment did the two robbers get scourged also and crucified, or do we don't know that?
We don't know that. Yeah, we really don't. Yeah, and notice too that Pilate refused to send the Romans. Mm-hmm. He says, "This is your job." He says, "I'll wash my hands." And Pilate admitted, "This is an innocent man." Remember, his wife had dreams about him. You can't do this. So this is why he came up with Isaiah. Barabbas was just a vile, wicked criminal. So in his mind, he's thinking, okay, they're not going to want this murderer released in their midst. But they said they went out into the crowd and actually forced people, probably bribed people to give false testimony and yell, crucify him. And Pilate said, okay, this is on your heads. And they said, okay, no problem. We will be guilty of his death.
Do you think that Pilate just had him scourged, hoping that the people would say, oh, this is enough? I mean, you don't have to crucify him, this is enough.
Could very well be, yeah.
I know the laws back then, they were saying how they were talking, I read a thing about how the two other guys, basically what they do is they break your arms and legs.
Yeah.
So that you die quicker. But I don't think they were scared because they were just a thief. They were not claiming to be God.
Yeah.
You know, so, but my thing is, it's just, I thought that, to me, if he whipped them enough, okay, look, he's had enough. You don't need to crucify him.
Oh, and you figure that the whips that they used, embedded with stone and glass and whatnot, literally ripped your body apart. And essentially, you could die from that.
Yeah.
The fact is, he didn't. And the point is, he was so brutally beaten, but not a bone of his body was broken. Which was not typical. You're right, they didn't break the bones. They didn't break his bones.
No, they didn't.
He was such a mess that they had to compel somebody else to carry his cross. He couldn't do it himself.
Yeah.
So.
Well, also, isn't it interesting in all the Gospels that they really don't, from 6 to 9, isn't that from like 6 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock? That's morning time. It's completely dark. And nobody really says that. Now, me, myself, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm one of these people, especially when the priest, wait a minute now, something is wrong here. It's completely dark at 8 o'clock in the morning, what is happening?
Well,
You know what I mean?
it was
It's interesting.
an illegal meeting of the priests.
Yeah, but
They're
those
not. They can't meet at night, but they did.
Yeah, but it was interesting. But as Jesus is on the cross, it's the morning and it's completely dark, and it's interesting how really, none of them, like all through it, that's a supernatural event. But no, all we hear is it was 6 to 9 for 3 hours is complete darkness. That itself is a supernatural event.
Well, it was. I think the timeline where he was there in the evening, really, because they had to take him down before the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
So and it came dark. So immediately take him down just before the Sabbath, which is sundown.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on the cross until sundown, and so that had to, because the next.
But it says the 6th and the 9th hour. Isn't the 6th hour 12 o'clock and the 9th hour 3?
6. I can look at it, but I know he was there until Sunday. They had to get him off the cross before the sun set.
Yeah.
Because
I was just wondering. But it's like, okay. Yeah.
But you know, it was a very cruel thing. I mean, just and you notice the women were there, the disciples weren't. It said at the very end John was, but they had all fled. They just left him completely, which is a sad story. Okay, one more chapter. Now, after the Sabbath, the first day of the week began to dawn. Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, came to see the tomb, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone from the door, and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, his clothing as white as snow, and the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. The angel answered and said to the women, "Don't be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He is risen. As he said, come, see the place where he lay. Go quickly and tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. Therefore you will see him. Behold, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb, fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples word. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, "Rejoice." And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. And Jesus said, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." Now while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priest all the things that had happened. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers. Again, they're paying the soldiers off now, saying, "Tell them, his disciples came at night and stole him away." That's amazing. The priests are breaking the 10 Commandments. Okay? Tell them that they stole him away while you were sleeping. First of all, soldiers didn't sleep. That was the death penalty. "And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure." So they took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews to this day. Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had appointed to them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore, make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." So we'll notice that we continue the Gospels, that they all tell the same story, but it's going to be a different view. We'll learn later on, and one of the controversy things that a little more detail when we get into Luke, because Luke was a historian. The fact that, it's controversial to a lot of people, but Jesus was not crucified on Friday, you know that, right? He was crucified on Thursday. That's just a historical fact. And Luke's the one that mentions it, because there's a difference between Sabbath and the high Sabbath. And Luke mentioned that he was crucified on the high Sabbath. High Sabbath is Passover. So Passover was on a Friday that year. We know that from historical fact. And then Sabbath was the next day. So he had to be taken down before the Passover. And then he was in the grave Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That gives you your 3 days. So people always, well, if he was crucified on Friday and he was resurrected on Sunday, where's the 3 days? And everybody comes up with all these theories. Well, the point is, you go back into history, and the high Sabbath was on a Friday, so they had to come down before the Passover was the next day. And then the following day, that was the Sabbath. And the following day after that was actually Sunday, which is the day he wrote. That explains everything. But for some reason, we still call Friday Good Friday, the day he was crucified. But historically, that never happened. And I ran into that history, I think when I was doing some research on something.
Isn't that more of a Catholic type thing?
It could be too, but Luke being the historian, I think we'll get to that later, where he actually mentions the High Sabbath, and the High Sabbath were all the special festivals, whether it be the Feast of Trumpets, the Passover one. It was a separate Sabbath. So this was like a long holiday weekend. It wasn't a normal Sabbath. It was Passover and then Sabbath. So it's like having 2 days off. So that's what happened back then. Okay, we're going to stop right there. We'll come back to Mark the next time we gather.